In a number of our parishes and schools this past week around the diocese, there's been a little bit of controversy. Maybe you've seen it, but it's the same kind of controversy that's been at school board meetings and other places. A big discussion about whether or not to wear masks. So it's been a bit of controversy. So people might have listened to today's gospel and said, there it is. See, Jesus addresses it right there. It's all about that washing hands stuff. It's right there. And where does Jesus land? His guys don't wash their hands. So there you go. So see? So I'm sure there are some this weekend who are drawing that conclusion from that gospel. And if they do, they've missed the point, because it has nothing to do with hand washing. That's not what it's about, even though that's the presenting issue, is the hand washing. But if you listen to what Jesus said back, it has nothing to do with hand washing, but it has something that's very important for you and I to listen to, because it is aimed at church people. It's aimed at believers, because it's an issue that is a problem for believers. So as you heard, the disciples weren't washing their hands, and the scribes and Pharisees were upset that they were not following the practice of the elders. Now it's interesting, they say very clearly, this is just simply a practice of the elders, our ancestors. Because I think there is an assumption on Christians' part when we hear it, that there must have been some rule in the Old Testament about hand washing, and that they were breaking a rule. But there isn't. There's a lot of rules in the Old Testament. Lots. Hundreds. There's no rule about hand washing. It's a custom that was picked up and actually greatly emphasized by people like the Essenes. The Essenes are the group that where the Dead Sea Scrolls come from. They were very austere in their practice of the faith, preparing for the Messiah to come. John the Baptist, they speculate, was one of the Essenes. The Essenes would take a ritual bath before every meal, the whole thing. So it'd be like you got up in the morning, you showered before breakfast, showered before lunch, showered before supper, showered before your evening snack, wanted to have ice cream, take a shower. You know, you had to, they would do a complete ritual bath beforehand. The speculation is this all comes from the idea that in the book of Exodus, in trying to describe how the Holy of Holies would be approached, there was a tub there to bathe in. So not your whole body, but to wash before you entered the Holy of Holies. So that perhaps from that came this custom that they washed their hands frequently. Not as much as the Romans. If you studied Roman history, you know the Romans were really into cleanliness, which goes away with the fall of the Roman Empire. You know, in the Middle Ages, they didn't take baths. They took a bath once a year or twice a year, just because you might need it once in a while. But the Romans really bathed a lot. The Jewish community did not. But it was a practice, simply a practice, not a rule. which is the point Jesus is making. That sometimes we church people, the scribes and Pharisees, take what is a practice and make it a rule. It's simply a tradition. And Jesus is not getting rid of any of the Old Testament rules. He keeps those, as we hear a little bit further on. So it isn't that Jesus is saying, you don't have to follow rules. You just do whatever you want. No. Jesus is saying, follow the rules that God gave you, not making up your own, which is what they had done. They were very upset that the disciples were not following a custom. So I think it's a challenge for us today as church people listening to that, to ask ourselves, what customs, what practices have we elevated to the level of God's teaching, or thinking that this is of that kind of importance? I know as a pastor, as I've gone from parish to parish, I usually hear when I first come to a parish about the parish rules. Well, this is the way we do it here, Father. Oh, is that from God? Yes. It's always been done that way here at Cabrini or at Columkills or at Guadalupe. This is the way we do it, and you better learn it, because if you're going to be our pastor here, this is the way we do it. I think, ooh, I don't remember that rule in the seminary, but apparently, but every parish has them. They take little customs and they raise them up to divine law when they're not. So what ones have you done that? Because maybe we do it in our own personal lives as well, not just church life. But I start assuming that this is really, really, really important. Well, why? Well, I don't remember why, but I have reached a point where I think it's really important. Sometimes it's just because it's what other people will think. Well, I have to act this way. Why? Well, you don't want people thinking something bad about you. And so you have to act like that? Yeah. You have to act like that so that they think good things about you. You can't go to that place or talk to that person, or you have to dress this way. Why? Well, we've raised a practice to a divine law. One of the ones I remember as a kid, and it was my poor neighbors, because I think they were Methodists, but they couldn't dance or play cards. And I think, what? And then they'd be like, you Catholics were really sinful, because we were dancing and drinking and playing cards. And I think, where does it say that in the Bible? It must, because it's a rule that you can't dance. Why not? David danced. There's dancing in the Old Testament. No, you know what dancing leads to? It leads to sin, because you get, people, can't dance, can't play cards. So Jesus wants us to follow the laws that God gives us and not be burdened by human traditions, by the stuff that we humans seem to think becomes really important because of what others might think about it. And then he kind of, with his quote from the prophet, zings us a little bit. How are you worshiping? How is your relationship with God right now? How is your prayer? Because Jesus is concerned that your relationship with God is heart-centered, that it is truly a relationship, and not so much concerned about how it looks, how it fits in to what others are thinking. He challenges the scribes and Pharisees. In vain do they worship. Worthless. In vain. Because they ignore what really matters. And so the challenge to us as well today is, are we paying attention to the things that God sees are important? Is our heart in tune with God? And then are our lives shaped by that? So that those things that Jesus mentions in his, I don't know, there are 13 of them there, don't do this stuff, is not good because this will lead you astray. Are we truly leading good lives away from that? We might start out with his list and say, oh, that's not me. Because, murder, that's not me. Stealing, no. Adultery, no, I don't do those things. Are you ever envious? Are you ever foolish? Do you ever tell a lie? Are you greedy? Would you like a little more? They aren't things far away. They are things that most of us Christians deal with in his list. So the little odd kind of story today that comes in our gospel gives us two challenges. First of all, don't waste our time on just human practices, but do focus on your relationship with God so that your heart and God's heart are one, close to each other, so that your life looks like it belongs to God.